Starseed of Gaia. Pause for a moment. Your body is not reacting. It is remembering. At this exact moment, your cellular vessel is being gently recalibrated to hold a higher coherence. I am Anya, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light. This is a direct and intentional transmission from the Arcturian Council, offered to you now. Before we go deeper, let me say this clearly. What you've been feeling is not a failure of your mind or body. Nothing is wrong with you. This transmission is not here to overwhelm. It's here to translate what your body already knows. Starseed. This energetic transmission is not here to entertain you. It is here to intervene. Not with force, not with fear, but with precision. Because the Arcturian Council does not speak to you when your life is calm and comfortable. They speak when your field is at the edge of a threshold, when your reality is about to reorganize itself, and you can feel the pressure building in your chest, your throat, your sleep, your relationships, your sense of identity. You may not have had words for it. You may have called it anxiety, exhaustion, restlessness, or something feels off. But what you are sensing is not dysfunction. It is dimensional friction. The moment your 3D identity starts failing to hold the frequency your soul is now carrying. And here is the first revelation. You were not selected by chance. And you are not here because you searched for the right video at the right time. You are here because your field emitted a signal that only a certain intelligence can read, an Arcturian resonance that translates as, ready for activation. The Arcturians have been watching the moment your nervous system became strong enough to hold remembrance without collapsing. They have been observing the exact timeline point when your inner structure could withstand truth. Because for certain souls, awakening is not a hobby, not a lifestyle, not a personality. It is a scheduled event in the architecture of your destiny. By the end of this transmission, you will understand why this moment is not repeatable, why the old you is already dissolving, and how one precise Arcturian download can unlock a new phase of coherent power within your mind, your heart, and your mission on Gaia. Stay with me, because what comes next is not gentle. It is accurate, and your DNA knows why you're here. You've felt it in small moments that made no sense to your logical mind. A sudden stillness in the room when you were about to make a decision. A strange pressure around your crown while trying to fall asleep. A wave of emotion rising for no reason, then disappearing as if something invisible passed through your field. Many Starseeds misinterpret these events as random or psychological. But as the Arcturians transmit, nothing meaningful in a Starseed's awakening is random. It is structured, it is encoded, and it is timed. The Arcturian Council works through what can be called frequency mathematics, not numbers as the human mind reduces them into symbols, but patterns of coherence. When your emotional body reaches a certain stability, when your energetic field becomes less reactive, when your identity is no longer anchored entirely to fear, something happens. You become readable to higher dimensional intelligence. That is the truth behind why some awaken and others do not. It is not about being superior. It is about being coherent enough to receive what would otherwise short-circuit your system. Think about how a radio works. You can't hear a station if you're off by even a small margin. The message still exists. The music still broadcasts. But you will only hear static unless your dial matches the frequency. Your life has been turning that dial for years, through heartbreak, through loneliness, through spiritual hunger, through the feeling of not belonging in the noise of the world. That sensation you carried, like you were observing Earth rather than living on it, was not a personality quirk. It was a sign that your consciousness was never meant to fully root inside the 3D illusion. And yet, you did root. You learned to function. You learned to mask your sensitivity. You learned to shrink your truth into acceptable shapes. You learned to become reasonable. Many Starseeds do this to survive, because the world rewards numbness and punishes resonance. But resonance cannot be permanently suppressed. It leaks out. It shows up as exhaustion, as sudden tears, as strange dreams, as a refusal to continue living a life that looks fine on the outside but feels like imprisonment on the inside. Here's what most people misunderstand. Awakening is not a reward for discipline. It is not something you earn by reading enough books, meditating enough hours, or cleansing enough trauma. Those practices can help stabilize you, yes. But for starseeds of certain lineages, awakening is often a contractual trigger, something activated when the timeline reaches a point of necessity. It is like a locked chamber inside you that only opens when the external world becomes incompatible with the internal truth you carry. And the Arcturians are known for one thing above all: precision of timing. They do not rush you. They do not flatter you. They calibrate you. They watch your nervous system the way an engineer watches a complex instrument. They wait until your structure can hold the voltage of remembrance. You may wonder, why does it feel so intense lately? Because intensity is not danger. It is information. Intensity often means you are close to a threshold, and thresholds are uncomfortable because they dissolve identity. The old you fights for relevance. It tries to keep the old story running. I'm just tired. I'm just sensitive. I'm just lost. I'm just overthinking. But the Arcturian transmission says, you are not lost. You are unthreading. Now let me make this real. Imagine someone who has lived their entire life with their shoulders tense, their stomach tight, their breath shallow. They think that is normal. Then one day, they finally breathe fully, and suddenly they realize they've been suffocating. Awakening is like that. It does not just give you new information. It exposes the ways you have been living half alive. So if you are here, Starseed, it means your system is ready to stop interpreting expansion as threat. It means you are ready to receive the Arcturian codes that reorganize your mind into clarity and your heart into coherent power. Because the next phase is not about learning, it is about becoming. And the first step of becoming is accepting one truth: this is not for everyone. The ebook, The 12 Arcturian Portals, is a restricted trilogy created for those who are ready to activate their 5D connection with the Arcturian masters, not in theory, but in real energetic experience. Inside, you'll access 12 powerful portals, with precise activation protocols, rituals, and practical techniques designed to awaken your stellar DNA and unlock what has been dormant within you. Amplified intuition, direct communication with spiritual guides, energetic expansion beyond the 3D matrix. Warning: once activated, your perception will not return to the previous state. Limited edition. Access can close at any moment. The link to claim your trilogy is in the first pinned comment. If this message reached you, it's not random. Your reality is changing because you are changing. Not gradually, not someday, now. Cliffhanger. Because once you understand what the Arcturians call structural change, you will realize your symptoms were never symptoms. They were signals. As the Arcturians transmit, what humans often call falling apart is frequently the beginning of dimensional reorganization. You thought you were losing yourself. In truth, you were losing a version of yourself that was built to survive an environment that could not honor your frequency. And there is a difference. When your life starts to shift, when relationships feel thin, when old goals lose meaning, when routines become unbearable, most people panic. They try to restore the old structure. They try to get back to normal. But normal, for a starseed in awakening, is often just a well-decorated cage. And your soul does not negotiate with cages forever. Dimensional reorganization has a signature. It begins subtly. A quiet dissatisfaction you can't explain. Then it grows, restlessness that can't be soothed by distractions. Then it becomes undeniable. Your body starts rejecting what your mind insists on tolerating. You might notice you can no longer fake enthusiasm. You can no longer stay in places that require you to lie to yourself. You can no longer shrink your truth without feeling physical consequences. tightness in the throat, pressure in the chest, heaviness in the limbs, or a strange buzz under the skin. This is not punishment. This is not failure. This is not you being too much. This is your field rejecting incoherence. In 3D, humans live by compromise. They compromise their truth for stability. They compromise their joy for approval. They compromise their intuition for logic. They compromise their boundaries for belonging. But a starseed's awakening begins when compromise becomes painful. Because pain is the body's way of saying, this alignment is no longer sustainable. Now, here is where the Arcturian transmission becomes very clear. The nervous system is not your enemy. It is your translator. If you feel fear, fatigue, or overwhelm, it does not mean the awakening is wrong. It means your system is adapting to a stronger signal. Think of it like upgrading a power grid. The first time you run higher voltage through old wiring, it overheats. That does not mean the voltage is bad. It means the wiring needs coherence. So what do you do when the wiring overheats? You do not shame it. You do not force it. You do not pretend it's fine. You upgrade the structure, gently, consistently, intelligently. The Arcturians are masters of structure. They do not teach emotional bypass. They teach energetic engineering, how to stabilize your field so the truth can land without destroying you. This is why some people wake up and become chaotic, spiritually inflated, or ungrounded. They received a frequency but lacked the structure to hold it. They tried to run higher consciousness through an unprepared nervous system. The result is confusion, not clarity. But you, Starseed, are being called into a different path. Coherence. And coherence is not a mood. It is an inner architecture. Let me give you an example from ordinary life. Imagine someone who has lived in survival mode their entire childhood. They grew up scanning for danger. Their body learned to stay ready. Then, as an adult, they move into a safe home with a loving partner. And suddenly, they start having anxiety. Why? Because their body doesn't recognize safety as normal. Their system expects threat. The safety feels unfamiliar, so the body interprets it as danger. This is what happens spiritually, too. When love begins to enter your field, old programs panic. When higher guidance comes closer, old wounds resist. When your mission activates, the part of you that learned to hide tries to pull you back into invisibility. But the Arcturian Council is not asking you to fight your fear. They are asking you to retrain your system, to teach your body that expansion is safe, to teach your mind that clarity is allowed, to teach your heart that being seen will not kill you. Because here is the hidden truth. The collapse is not collapsing you. It is collapsing what is false. It is collapsing what cannot go with you. It is collapsing the version of you that was designed to be accepted by a world asleep. And yes, there is grief in that. Because you may mourn the years you spent performing. You may mourn the friendships that only survived when you were smaller. You may mourn the identity that kept you safe. But grief is not regression. Grief is release. Cliffhanger. Because once you understand why your reality is rearranging, you'll stop trying to save the old timeline, and you'll finally learn what the Arcturians call the first portal of true power. The first Arcturian portal is not a ritual. It is not a mantra. It is not a cosmic aesthetic. It is sovereignty. The moment you stop letting external energy dictate your internal state. As the Arcturians transmit, a Starseed's mission cannot fully activate until the Starseed stops leaking power. And most people leak power in ways they don't even notice. They leak power through people-pleasing, through over-explaining, through absorbing the emotions of others, through scanning rooms for approval, through feeling responsible for everyone's comfort, through turning their sensitivity into self-blame. You were not designed to be a sponge. You were designed to be a transmitter. But you can't transmit if your channel is constantly disrupted by other people's noise. You can't hold a coherent frequency if your mind is always negotiating with fear. And you can't become what you came here to be if your identity is built around being acceptable. Sovereignty begins with one decision: I will no longer abandon myself. That sounds simple, but it is one of the most radical acts a soul can commit to on Gaia. Let's bring this into daily life. Imagine you're in a conversation and someone subtly dismisses you. Your nervous system reacts. You feel a tightening. You want to shrink. You want to adjust your words so they like you. You want to laugh it off, to make it lighter, to become smaller so you don't feel the sting of rejection. That is the old program. Safety comes from being liked. Sovereignty is the new program. Safety comes from being aligned. This does not mean you become cold. It does not mean you become arrogant. It means you become internally anchored. You stop outsourcing your worth to external response. The Arcturians teach that your field is an ecosystem. If you don't manage what enters it, it will be managed by default, by media, by crowds, by family patterns, by collective fear. You will think your anxiety is yours when it's actually absorbed. You will think your exhaustion is physical when it's actually energetic. You will think your doubt is rational when it's actually inherited. So the first portal requires a new discipline, energetic boundaries that are loving and firm. Here's what this looks like in practice. When you enter a room, you stop scanning. You breathe. You drop into your body. You claim your space. You remind your system, I am safe inside myself. When someone is upset, you stop taking responsibility for their emotions. You offer compassion without collapse. You listen without absorbing. You hold love without losing yourself. When fear rises, you do not fight it. You do not dramatize it. You ask, is this fear mine, or is it old programming trying to protect me from being visible? Because the deeper truth is this: many starseeds are not afraid of failure. They are afraid of impact. They are afraid of what will happen when they stop hiding. They are afraid that if they fully embody their frequency, everything will change. And yes, it will. But that change is not punishment. It is alignment. And this is where the Arcturian Council becomes direct. You cannot carry your mission while still negotiating with the approval of people who benefit from your smallness. You cannot anchor higher coherence while still feeding the habits that numb you. You cannot be a bridge while refusing to be seen. If this message resonated with you, hit the like button now and tell us in the comments how this echoed in your consciousness. Now let's go even deeper. Sovereignty also means you stop treating your intuition like a suggestion. The Arcturians transmit through subtle knowing. A quiet inner know. A gentle pull toward something. A strange certainty that arrives without proof. The human mind will demand evidence. But your soul recognizes truth by resonance. Here is a story, because you need to feel this, not just understand it. There was a starseed who spent years trying to figure out their path. They studied, they listened to teachers, they asked for signs, but every time the inner nudge came, leave this job, end this relationship, start this creative work, they delayed, they rationalized. They said, later, when it's safer. Then one day their body forced them to stop. Burnout, panic, a collapse that was not a collapse but a reset. They finally sat in stillness and asked, what do you want from me? And what they heard was not a voice. It was a feeling, a simple instruction. Stop betraying what you already know. That starseed changed one small thing first, one boundary, one honest conversation, one act of self-respect. And that single act triggered a cascade. New people appeared, new resources, new clarity. The timeline shifted because the field shifted. The Arcturians did not save them. The Starseeds saved themselves by choosing coherence. That is sovereignty. Cliffhanger. Because the moment you become sovereign, your reality responds, and the next portal opens. And that portal is not about you anymore. It's about what you're here to activate on Gaia. Once sovereignty activates, the next phase begins. The unity grid. This is where your awakening stops being personal therapy and becomes planetary architecture. The Arcturians are not here to make you feel special. They are here to make you useful to coherence. That may sound intense, but it is deeply loving, because usefulness to coherence is freedom. It means your life stops being random suffering and becomes purposeful transformation. The unity grid is not a metaphor. It is the energetic network formed when individuals hold coherent love in dense environments. Every time you regulate your nervous system instead of reacting, you strengthen the grid. Every time you choose truth without cruelty, you strengthen the grid. Every time you forgive without collapsing, you strengthen the grid. Every time you hold compassion without self-abandonment, you strengthen the grid. Most people think transformation happens through big events. But the Arcturian transmission reveals something else. The timeline changes through micro-choices made consistently. Think of a bridge being built. One plank doesn't look like a bridge. One bolt doesn't feel like progress. But over time, structure forms. The unity grid is built like that, through thousands of small coherent choices that reprogram the collective field. Now, this is where starseeds often struggle. Because you can feel the density. You can feel the cruelty people normalize. You can feel the noise, and you may ask, how do I stay open-hearted without being destroyed? The answer is not to shut down. The answer is to become coherent. Coherence means your love is not fragile. It is structured. It has boundaries. It has truth. It has discernment. The Arcturians transmit that many humans confuse love with self-sacrifice. They believe being loving means tolerating disrespect. It means staying in draining relationships. It means giving until they are empty. That is not love. That is conditioning. True love has a spine. So when you begin to anchor the unity grid, your life will likely rearrange, not because you're being punished, because what is incoherent cannot stay. You may notice, certain friendships feel hollow, certain conversations feel exhausting, certain entertainment feels heavy, certain ambitions feel meaningless, and simultaneously, you may feel called to simplicity nature, silent service, healing arts, creative work that carries frequency. This is your mission emerging through preference shifts. The soul communicates through attraction and repulsion. If something no longer fits, you will feel it. Here's a real example. You may start needing solitude, not because you hate people, but because your field is recalibrating. Solitude becomes the lab where coherence stabilizes. You may also start craving truth, not harsh truth, but clean truth. The kind of truth that ends the inner war. Are these truths expanding your perspective? Share this video with someone who needs to hear this. Now let's talk about the sacred challenge, the moment you realize your life is no longer just yours, not in a burdensome way, in a sacred way. Because Starseed, your presence influences others even when you say nothing. People feel nervous systems, they feel coherence, they feel safety, they feel chaos. If you become calm, you give others permission to soften. If you become truthful, you give others permission to stop performing. If you become compassionate, you give others permission to heal. That is how the unity grid spreads. Not through preaching, through presence. And here is the deeper Arcturian teaching. The grid is strengthened not when you avoid darkness, but when you move through darkness without becoming it. When you can sit with grief without drowning. When you can feel anger without becoming cruel. When you can hold boundaries without hatred. This is advanced consciousness. And yes, it takes practice. Cliffhanger. Because when you stabilize your role in the unity grid, your channel opens wider, and then the Arcturian Council begins transmitting what humans call light codes, but what they call geometric intelligence. The Arcturians are known across star lineages for their mastery of geometry as consciousness. Humans think of geometry as shapes. The Arcturians transmit geometry as instruction, as living architecture that reorganizes matter, emotion, and perception. When an Arcturian light code enters your field, it is not just a pretty concept. It's a pattern that upgrades the way your mind holds reality. It can create sudden clarity. It can dissolve old emotional loops. It can open dormant intuition. It can even shift the way your body processes energy. This is why some starseeds feel strange sensations when listening to transmissions like this: tingling, warmth, pressure, emotional release, sudden calm. The body is responding to pattern. Let me explain simply. If your life has been run by unconscious patterns, fear, scarcity, self-doubt, then your field is organized around those patterns. Geometry is a way to reorganize the field. When the pattern changes, your life changes because your choices change, your perception changes, your magnetism changes. This is why awakening often feels like you can't go back. Once your perception expands, the old story cannot fully convince you again. And here's where the Arcturian Council gets precise. Light codes do not work if you treat them like entertainment. They work when you allow them to become practice, when you embody the pattern. So what does embodiment look like? It looks like choosing coherence when your mind wants drama. It looks like choosing simplicity when your ego wants complexity. It looks like choosing truth when your fear wants performance. It looks like choosing rest when your conditioning demands constant output. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be part of this transformational cosmic journey. Now, let's talk about the emotional reality of this portal. Because many starseeds, when geometry activates, face a paradox. They feel more connected to everything, and at the same time, more detached from old life. They start seeing the matrix. They start seeing the scripts. They start noticing how people avoid themselves, and this can create loneliness. But the loneliness is not abandonment. It is transition. You are leaving one frequency community and entering another. You are leaving the world where performance is currency and entering the world where coherence is currency. At first, that feels like emptiness, because you haven't yet met your new resonance. This is why the Arcturians emphasize community, not crowds, but aligned fields, because the nervous system stabilizes faster when it is mirrored by coherence. Here is a story to anchor this. A starseed began receiving geometric visions in meditation, spirals, lattices, luminous patterns that felt more real than thoughts. They got scared. They told themselves they were imagining it. They avoided stillness for weeks. Their life became noisy again, but the pattern kept returning, through dreams, synchronicities, sudden downloads of understanding. Finally, they stopped resisting and asked, "What is this?" And the answer arrived as a feeling. You are not seeing shapes. You are remembering structure. They began living differently. They stopped forcing outcomes. They started listening to timing. They began honoring boundaries. They chose truth in small moments. And their entire life reorganized. New work, new relationships, deeper peace. That is how geometry becomes human life. Not by drawing symbols, by becoming the symbol. Because when geometry activates, the next portal opens. And that portal is the one most starseeds fear, being seen. Not online, in life. In energy. In mission. There is a moment in every starseed's awakening when the inner light stops being private. The Arcturians call this mission Emergence. It's the phase where your frequency begins influencing your life externally. Your work, your relationships, your path, your voice. This is where many retreat. Because visibility triggers old wounds. Visibility awakens the fear of rejection, abandonment, ridicule, and loss. And those fears are not irrational. Many of you have lived lifetimes where being spiritually awake made you a target. Your body remembers. Your subconscious remembers. Your lineage remembers. But as the Arcturians transmit, the mission does not ask you to be fearless. It asks you to be coherent with fear present. This is the portal of mature power. Visibility begins in small ways. It begins when you stop pretending you agree, when you stop laughing at what hurts you, when you stop editing your truth into palatable fragments, when you stop dimming your sensitivity to make others comfortable. And yes, some people will not like it. But Starseed, the deeper truth is this: if someone only loves you when you are smaller, they do not love you. They love the version of you that serves their comfort. So the mission emergence phase often includes relationship shifts. Some connections deepen, others dissolve. It can feel like loss, but it is actually alignment. Now here is where I must deliver the Arcturian message clearly. Your mission on Gaia is not to be understood by everyone. It is to be received by those in resonance. A lighthouse does not convince ships. It simply stands, and those who need it recognize it. This is not for everyone. The ebook. The 12 Arcturian Portals is a restricted trilogy created for those who are ready to activate their 5D connection with the Arcturian masters. Not in theory, but in real energetic experience. Inside, you'll access 12 powerful portals, with precise activation protocols, rituals, and practical techniques designed to awaken your stellar DNA and unlock what has been dormant within you. Amplified intuition, direct communication with spiritual guides, energetic expansion beyond the 3D matrix. Warning: once activated, your perception will not return to the previous state. Limited edition. Access can close at any moment. The link to claim your trilogy is in the first pinned comment. If this message reached you, it's not random. Now let's continue. Because the mission is not just doing spiritual things. The mission is being a stabilizer, an anchor of coherence, a bridge. This might show up as healing work, yes, but it might also show up as being the calm presence in a chaotic workplace. It might show up as parenting differently, as creating art that carries frequency, as speaking truth with compassion, as building structures that honor humanity instead of exploiting it. And if you feel pressure, like you must figure it out fast, release that. The Arcturians do not rush mission, they calibrate it. Because mission without coherence becomes ego. And ego missions burn out. So your task is not to force purpose. Your task is to become stable enough that purpose can move through you cleanly. This includes taking care of your body, eating and resting in a way that supports signal reception, reducing noise, choosing environments that don't fragment you, stopping the addiction to urgency, learning to regulate your system when triggered. Because mission is not an idea. It is a frequency you carry consistently. And when you finally accept visibility, the final portal opens, the one that transforms your entire timeline, embodiment in the 3D world without losing your 5D coherence. Embodiment is the point where your awakening becomes undeniable, not because you talk about it, but because you live it. You become the transmission in the grocery store, in conflict, in fatigue, in ordinary moments when no one is watching. This is where starseeds either stabilize into power or fall back into seeking. Because seeking is safer than embodiment. Seeking lets you stay a student forever. Embodiment makes you responsible for what you know. As the Arcturians transmit, embodiment is not spiritual perfection. It is spiritual integrity. It is when your actions match your frequency, when your words match your heart, when your boundaries match your truth, when your life becomes aligned enough that your energy stops leaking. Embodiment begins with accepting a hard truth. You cannot carry a higher timeline while maintaining lower habits. Lower habits are not bad. They are simply incompatible. They include staying in relationships that require self-betrayal, using distraction to avoid feeling, performing spirituality instead of living truth, saying yes when your body says no, living for approval instead of resonance. Embodiment asks for one thing: consistency, not intensity, not obsession. Consistency. This is how you become a living portal. And now, Starseed, here is the most important Arcturian teaching of all. Home is not a location. Home is coherence. It is the inner reunion of all the parts of you that were split by survival. You were never broken. You were adaptive. You were never weak. You were sensitive. You were never late. You were calibrating. And yes, the world is dense. But the Arcturians did not send you here to escape the density. They sent you here to bring coherence into it. So tonight, before sleep, place one hand on your heart and one hand on your lower abdomen. Breathe slowly, and speak this in your own words, not as religion, not as performance, but as a command to your field. I choose coherence. I release the timeline of self-betrayal. I accept my mission with clarity. I allow my system to stabilize into truth. I become the transmission. Say it slowly. Let your body register it. If emotions rise, let them rise. Tears are not weakness. Tears are release. If resistance appears, do not fight it. Resistance is simply the old structure dissolving. Then listen. Not for voices, for resonance, for calm, for subtle warmth, for the feeling of being watched by love that does not demand anything from you, only alignment. Because the Arcturian Council is not here to worship you. They are here to awaken you. If this message impacted your life, leave your like, comment your reflection, and share with others. Each of you is part of this chain of light.